I think that, first of all, we could not solve technical problem, for example, securing borders, without changing minds, without changing thought of the Western civilization. Because immigration, post-feminism, of so-called feminism, liberalism better than feminism, because there are some versions of feminism I like. Standpoint feminism, for example, that affirms that there is no hierarchy between men and women, but there is two universes, two perspectives, so completely different universes. They could overlap, but they still they still have totally different structures. So that is the richness. So the dialogue is possible because there are two worlds shocking, entering into contact and in conflict at the same time. Standpoint feminism that doesn't consider that women should be equal with men, but women should stay women in their own worlds and trying to defend its structure, confronting with too aggressive, for example, patriarchy, because there are spiritual patriarchy of knights, of nobles, of spiritual thinkers, and there is very low patriarchy that is not spiritual, it's aggressive, with no culture. So I'd rather stay on the side of women fighting for their beautiful universe against this low machism, but at the same time idea of liberal feminism is very bad, because they try to kill what is feminine in women, so they destroy womanhood, and they try to put them transform them in parody on the man. That is the worst thing to imagine, I think. But idea that all these consequences of wrong mentality, wrong way of thinking, with materialism, with immigration politics, with multiculturalism, they are based on some philosophical principles that we should change. Without that, we could not effectively defend our borders, our identity, because liberalism as ideology, as philosophy, insists that there is only one identity, individual. That is the origin of all other. If there is only one identity, individual identity, and there is no collective identity, so, or if there is, it should be overcome or destroyed. That is the main principle of liberalism. So we have no reason to oppose immigration, because they are individuals exactly as ourselves. So we could not blame them to be of different culture, to have different identity, because liberalism denies existence of any collective identities. And on the individual level, they are individuals like us. So we could not use cultural argument, ethnical, religious argument, because all these faculties are refused, are denied theoretically by liberalism. So
I have been meaning to do a video about Aleksandr Dugan for quite some time. I had been sort of keeping an eye on him when long before Lauren Southern interviewed him. I had seen an interview he had done on Red Ice TV, and I didn't understand what the fuck. I didn't fully comprehend the difference between him and a regular fascist, and at the same time, there's a lot of like magical thinking involved in his position. So, you know, trying to understand in a meaningful way what the proposition of Aleksandr Dugan's national Bolshevism, fourth political theory system is sometimes as indecipherable, as understanding the meaning of Jordan Peterson's system of political thought, if you can even call Jordan B. Peterson a political theorist, because Jordan Peterson presents himself in the language of self-help, and then it has the trappings of political discourse. It has the trappings of political revolutionary thought, but it's more or less here's this personal self-help theory combined with the language of therapy, of psychotherapy, and combined with your convenient political straw man, your favorite political enemies as the source of all of your emotional, psychic pain. So, looking at Aleksandr Dugan, he is he is definitely more discernibly political because of his involvement with the in real life national Bolshevism movement, which is like another attempt by Nazis have always tried to assimilate economic populist rhetoric into their platform because it lets them capitalize on the fall of the existing capitalist order, exploit the fall of capitalism and exploit the grievances, because usually fascism comes after a period of what we would call today neoliberal capitalist decay, in which people are given a quasi-libertine bourgeoisie society, but that is brutally and inhumanely unequal, followed by and that's unsustainable, right? Just like the Roaring '20s and the Bush era economic policies that led to a brief boom and then a massive bust, which you could probably trace 2008's decadence back to actually to the 90s. A deregulation bill that passed at the very, very end, like the last year of Bill Clinton's presidency. So, and then that led to, in 2008, a massive economic disaster. And now, after years of externalizing the crimes of Wall Street onto the populace via international austerity programs, which were actually implemented most severely by the European Central Bank in the EU. And I've always said I'm anti-EU. I fucking hate the EU. The EU is the architect of the future rise of fascism, with these brutal corporatist, in the Chomskyan sense, corporatist austerity regimes. You put people into a position of emotional desperation and existential dread, and then these fucking fascists show up at the door and they make a deal that seems like one you can't refuse. We're going to restore national dignity, we're going to bring back economic prosperity, and at the same time we're going to give you broad philosophical answers to life's questions about race and religion and all that stuff. So the scamsters show up in the wake of the austerity, and that's why we are where we are now, where European fascism is legitimately rising inside of electoral politics. We also have, in North America, Jordan P. Peterson popped up, and apparently in Eastern Europe, Dugan, who supposedly has strong ties to Vladimir Putin via the Russian Orthodox Church, has managed to become a more mainstream political figure, and has become sort of a populist, pop culture political theorist. But his theory, his fourth political theory, is basically a repolishing of third position. If you ever hear somebody refer to themselves as a third positionist, they're fundamentally someone who disavows capitalism and communism. And this is, a third positionist is essentially a fascist. They believe in a strongman regime and national ideology based on race, on the people, on the nation state, and et cetera, et cetera. You should be pretty well initiated by now on this channel as to what the substance of third position is. So, whatever. Aleksandr Dugan comes out and he needs a gimmick, and he starts using some of the kind of like dragons and lobsters talk that Peterson uses, but he tailors it more towards the phenomenology of Russian culture. So he becomes a controversial but popular political figure. He basically, supposedly, he takes Nazism and just buffs out some of the language that was controversial and that we've seen real life implications for, and just substitutes more exotic phenomenological terms, mostly derived from a actual Nazi party member, a philosopher who passed away some time ago, named Martin Heidegger. Is the to the extent that, for example, Slavoj Žižek is influenced by Jacques Lacan. That's the extent to which Aleksandr Dugan's philosophy is impacted by real-life fascist Martin Heidegger's ideas about metaphysics, and it's just the same thing as the Nazis. The Nazis used metaphysical allegory. They used ancient tribalist iconography and magical thinking, but what they're proposing in the end is the exact same thing. Basically, a fascist system apologized for by these exotic and sort of bizarre justifications and essentialist. Again, what the through line is here is essentialism, and that the hierarchy is essential, it's fundamental, and that traditionalism is a state of nature that we need to, because again, obviously when people are in a society that's decaying the way that right now liberal capitalism is, they have a natural human instinct to want to regress to a state of nature, whether that's anarchism or socialism or mutualism, or in this case, essentialist traditionalism. That's the through line. Within fascism of all these brands, it offers people an easy answer to their problems. We have departed from humanity's original state of nature. We need to return to the values that have been set by nature. I mean, that's why a lot of these fucking Nazis are vegans, is because there's a lot of naturalist language in Nazi ideology about being connected to the soil and being connected to the land and all that stuff. So, after all this frustration and research trying to understand why Aleksandr Dugan is so controversial, and why is this guy a big deal, and then the Nazi communist synergized iconography, and my final conclusion is that Aleksandr Dugan is Russian B. Peterson. He just takes fascism, he fills it with a bunch of magical realism and a bunch of exotic terms for very classical fascist principles. He's nothing new. He's just another charlatan in this long parade of right-wing scamsters who have become very dangerous, as our society is very unstable and is full of desperate people looking for easy answers.